I bought the dashcam at a rest stop somewhere in Nebraska. 2 in the morning, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the kind of place where the coffee burns your throat and tastes like chemicals. I'd been driving for 16 hours straight, hauling machine parts from Toledo to Sacramento, and my eyes felt like they'd been rubbed with sandpaper. The cashier was a kid with acne scars and bloodshot eyes. Travis, according to his name tag. He was scrolling through his phone with the blank expression of someone who'd given up on sleep years ago. I grabbed a sandwich from the cooler, a bag of chips, something with enough salt and preservatives to keep me awake another 4 hours. That's when I noticed the dashcam sitting on the counter in a clear plastic bag. Older model, boxy, cracked lens cover. Cords tangled around it like dead vines. "How much?" I asked. $20, Travis said without looking up. "Works fine." I should have asked why he was selling it. Should have wondered what kind of person unloads a dashcam at a gas station in the middle of the night. But I was 3 days into a cross-country haul, running on 4 hours of sleep and truck stop stimulants, and $20 was cheap insurance against the kind of fraud I'd been hearing about from other drivers. Rear-end collisions blamed on the trucker. Pedestrians throwing themselves in front of rigs for settlement money. I paid, stuffed the camera into my jacket, and walked back out into the cold. The parking lot was nearly empty at this hour, just a handful of semis scattered across the cracked asphalt like sleeping giants. The wind cut across the open space, carrying the smell of diesel and wet pavement. My truck sat at the far end, running lights glowing amber in the darkness, engine still idling to keep the cab warm. I'd left it running out of habit, the way you leave a porch light on when you live alone. The truck was a 10-year-old Peterbilt 579, diesel and stale food smell baked into the upholstery. It wasn't much, but it was mine, but with a loan I'd be paying off for another 3 years. The sleeper cab had carried me across more miles than I cared to count, from coast to coast and back again, a rolling home that smelled like rubber and exhaust. I climbed in, tossed the sandwich onto the passenger seat, and pulled the dashcam from my pocket. No instruction manual, just a suction cup mount and a single button on the side. I pressed it. A red LED blinked to life. I stuck it to the windshield above the rearview mirror, plugged the cord into the cigarette lighter. The screen flickered, showed a grainy image of the parking lot, then went dark. Good enough. I fired up the engine, felt the cab shudder as the diesel turned over, and pulled back onto the interstate. The white lines began their endless blur beneath my headlights. 3 days passed. Omaha to Boise with machine parts, then a pickup of canned goods heading east. The rhythm of long-haul trucking settled over me like a familiar blanket, both comforting and suffocating. Truck stop coffee that tasted like battery acid, static-filled AM radio stations fading in and out as I crossed state lines. Talk radio hosts ranting about politics I didn't care about, country songs about lost loves and open roads, advertisements for lawyers who specialized in accident claims. I ate most of my meals behind the wheel, one hand on the steering wheel while the other unwrapped gas station sandwiches or shoveled cold French fries into my mouth. I pissed in bottles when the next rest stop was too far away. I showered every third day at truck stops that charged $10 for 5 minutes of lukewarm water. The hours bled together into a gray soup of highway and rest stops, days measured in miles instead of time, my life reduced to the view through a windshield and the sound of tires on asphalt. The camera blinked red on my windshield, and I forgot it was there. Then outside Salt Lake City, a sedan swerved into my lane without signaling. I nearly clipped it, felt the Peterbilt lurch as I yanked the wheel. That night, parked at a rest area under a flickering streetlight, I remembered I could check the footage. Evidence, just in case the sedan driver decided to file a false claim. I dug the memory card from the camera, booted up my laptop from behind the passenger seat, and waited for the files to load. There were a dozen video clips, each time-stamped. I found the one from earlier that day and hit play. Grainy afternoon sun. The sedan drifting into frame. my voice muttering a curse. Perfect. I was about to eject the car when I noticed something wrong. The folder showed files going back 2 weeks. I'd only owned the camera for 3 days. A chill crawled up my spine. I clicked on one of the older videos, dated 10 days before I'd bought the device. The footage showed my truck. Same dashboard, same air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror, same coffee-stained cup holder. But the angle was from the passenger seat, looking across the cab at me behind the wheel. My hand on the gear shift, eyes on the road, completely unaware I was being filmed. The camera was mounted on the windshield. It couldn't record from the passenger seat. It was physically impossible. A chill crawled up my spine, slow and deliberate, like cold fingers walking up my vertebrae. I felt my scalp tighten, felt the hair on my arms stand up beneath my jacket sleeves. My mouth had gone dry. I swallowed, but it didn't help. The saliva tasted metallic, like fear has a flavor. I checked another file. This one showed the exterior of my truck, filmed from outside the windshield looking in. I could see myself through the glass, face slack, eyes half closed, fighting sleep in the dark. The footage shook slightly, unsteady, like it was handheld. But there was no one holding it. Just me, alone in the cab, driving through empty night. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking. The cab suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker, like the walls were pressing in. I told myself it was a glitch, corrupted files from a previous owner that hadn't been properly erased. Cameras malfunction all the time. Memory cards degrade. Data gets corrupted. Cross-contamination between files, maybe, or some weird artifact of how the device stored footage. There had to be a rational explanation, something technical I didn't understand because I wasn't an engineer or a computer expert. But even as I tried to convince myself, I knew I was lying. Deep down, in that animal part of the brain that recognizes danger before the conscious mind catches up, I knew something was wrong with that camera. Something fundamental and impossible and deeply, terribly wrong. But I couldn't shake the image of myself being filmed from angles that didn't exist. Couldn't stop thinking about that footage of the passenger seat, of the view through the windshield from outside, of myself sleeping unaware while something watched and recorded. I pulled back onto the highway and tried to ignore the blinking red light above me. The road stretched empty ahead, just white lines and darkness and the occasional semi hauling through the night. By morning, when the sun came up and turned the sky the color of rust, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Almost. For days later, parked at a way station outside Cheyenne while I waited for my logbook inspection to clear, I decided to check the footage again. I told myself I just needed to see normal recordings, proof that the previous files had been a fluke. But when I opened the folder, there were new files. Dozens of them. All dated within the last 4 days. The most recent showed my truck from an overhead angle, as though the camera was mounted on the ceiling of the cab. But it was still on the windshield. I could see it in the frame, red LED blinking in the lower corner like a tiny eye. I watched myself sleep in the bunk behind the driver's seat, curled on my side, one arm draped over the mattress edge. The angle shifted slowly, deliberately, panning across the cab like a surveillance camera. It lingered on my face. Zoomed in slightly, close enough that I could see the stubble on my jaw, the way my eyelids twitched during REM sleep. Then it pulled back. No sound except the faint hum of static. But I could feel it watching, studying me like a specimen under glass. I ejected the memory card and held it in my palm. It was warm, warmer than it should have been, almost hot to the touch. Like it had been running a processor at full capacity. I thought about throwing the whole camera away, smashing it against the pavement and walking away. Instead, I slid the card back into the slot, closed the laptop, and sat there in the cab, staring at the red light on my windshield, trying to understand what it wanted from me. A week later, I found footage dated 3 days in the future. I stared at the timestamp, certain I'd misread it. But the numbers didn't change. 3 days from now. I recognized the road in the clip immediately, a lonely 2-lane route through the Nevada desert I was scheduled to drive later that week. In the footage, I was gripping the wheel with both hands, shoulders tense, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds like I was expecting something to appear behind me. I watched myself reach for the radio, twist the dial through static, then glance out the side window at the empty desert rolling past. 30 seconds of footage, then it cut to black, replaced by crackling static. The camera was recording things that hadn't happened yet. Events that existed only as future possibilities, somehow captured and stored on a memory chip. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't call a friend or a mechanic or anyone who might have an explanation. Because what would I say? That my dashcam could see the future? They'd think I'd been on the road too long, that the isolation and sleepless nights had finally broken something in my head. So I kept driving. Kept the footage to myself. And when the day came, 3 days later, I drove that Nevada highway and lived out the scene exactly as I'd watched it. Every movement identical. The way I gripped the wheel with both hands. The way I reached for the radio and heard nothing but static. The way I glanced out the window at the exact moment a vulture circled overhead. It was like I was following a script written by someone else. That night, when I checked the footage, I found the same clip recorded again. Same highway, same 30 seconds, same movements. But this time filmed from outside the truck, looking in through the driver's side window. The perspective was impossible, hovering in midair beside my door as I drove 70 miles an hour down an empty road. I watched myself grip the wheel, reach for the radio, glance at the mirror. And I watched something else. A shadow in the passenger seat. Faint, barely visible against the gray interior fabric, like a smudge of darkness that didn't quite belong. But it was there, shifting slightly, adjusting its position as though trying to get comfortable. I rewound the footage and watched again. The shadow moved. Independently. Separate from any trick of light or reflection. I hadn't been alone in the truck that day. For the next 72 hours, I barely slept. Couldn't. Every time I tried to close my eyes in the bunk, I'd see that shadow in the passenger seat, shifting and adjusting like it was settling in for a long drive. I'd imagine I could feel it there even now, sitting beside me in the darkness, watching me with eyes I couldn't see. I started talking to myself just to fill the silence. Narrating my own actions like a sports commentator. Now I'm checking the mirrors. Now I'm adjusting my speed. Now I'm taking this exit for fuel. Anything to prove I was still in control, still the one making decisions, still autonomous and real and not just some puppet being filmed by an invisible audience. The isolation got worse. Long-haul trucking is lonely by nature, but this was different. This was the loneliness of being observed without being seen. The kind of isolation that comes from knowing you're never truly alone, that something is always watching, always recording, always there in your blind spot. I stopped using the bunk entirely. Started pulling 20-hour shifts behind the wheel, downing energy drinks until my hands shook and my vision blurred at the edges. Better to stay awake than risk what the camera might show me while I slept. Better to keep moving than give it time to record me at rest, vulnerable, unaware. Other truckers started giving me weird looks at the truck stops. I caught my reflection in a bathroom mirror one morning and understood why. Bloodshot eyes with dark circles underneath like bruises. 3 days of stubble. Hair greasy and unwashed. The look of a man coming apart at the seams. But I couldn't stop checking the footage. Every night, I'd review what the camera had captured, scrolling through clip after clip, trying to find a pattern, trying to understand the rules of whatever game I'd stumbled into. The camera recorded constantly, capturing angles that defied every law of physics I understood. One clip showed me from inside my own skull, the dashboard warping and bending through what looked like a fisheye lens embedded directly in my brain. Another showed the highway from hundreds of feet above, my truck reduced to a tiny speck crawling across vast desert emptiness. I stopped sleeping. The bunk felt exposed, vulnerable, like I was lying on a stage beneath invisible spotlights. I'd lie there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the engine's constant hum and the creak of the suspension over rough pavement. Every time I closed my eyes, the footage played on a loop inside my head. All those impossible angles, all those perspectives that shouldn't exist. The camera wasn't just recording anymore. It was predicting. Showing me moments of danger before they happened, like warnings from some mechanical oracle. A blown tire on a mountain pass, captured 2 days before the blowout. A drunk driver swerving into my lane, filmed from an angle that showed his face through his windshield before I'd even seen his headlights. Black ice on a Montana bridge, the footage showing my truck starting to fishtail before I'd reached that section of road. I started using the predictions as a guide. If the camera showed me swerving left, I'd swerve at that exact spot and find a pothole that would have shredded my tire. If it showed me braking hard, I'd slow down and watch a deer bolt across the highway exactly where I would have been. It worked. Every time. I avoided accidents, sidestepped disasters, stayed one step ahead of the road's casual brutality. But the cost was measurable in sleepless nights and frayed nerves. Because the angles grew more invasive with every passing day. Clips filmed from behind my eyes, showing the dashboard from inside my own vision. Footage from inside my chest cavity, my heartbeat visible as a pulsing red glow. Perspectives that made my hands shake and my stomach turn, that made me question whether I was still the one in control of my own body. The camera was burrowing deeper, peeling back layers of reality like skin from an onion, trying to get at something underneath. Then I found the final recording. Dated exactly 1 week ahead. Thursday night, 11:47 p.m. The footage showed my truck on a Montana highway I recognized immediately, a long desolate road through the Badlands where cell service died and the only lights were stars. I was driving, both hands white-knuckled on the wheel, face pale and drawn in the dashboard's green glow. I watched myself glance at the rearview mirror. My eyes were wide, pupils blown huge like I'd seen something terrible. The truck drifted left, crossed the faded yellow center line, then jerked back with an overcorrection that made the whole rig shudder. I reached for the radio with one trembling hand, twisted the dial frantically through nothing but static. Then I looked out the side window, and my mouth opened like I was screaming, but there was no sound in the footage. The clip cut abruptly to a new angle. From somewhere impossibly high above, looking straight down at the highway like footage from a satellite or drone. I watched the Peterbilt drift again, this time all the way across the center line into the opposite lane. No other traffic anywhere, no headlights in either direction, just my truck swerving wildly as though I'd lost all control. The camera zoomed in slowly, deliberately, focusing on the cab. Through the windshield I could see myself slumped forward over the wheel, head lolling to one side, arms hanging limp. The truck veered right, left the pavement, hit the gravel shoulder in a spray of dust and stones. Then it began to roll. Once. The world inverting, windows shattering into diamonds of glass. Twice. Metal screaming as the cab crumpled, the trailer jackknifing behind. 3 times. A slow-motion collapse of everything I owned, everything I was, turning into twisted wreckage. The footage ended with the truck on its side in the ditch, wheels still spinning uselessly in the air, steam or smoke rising from the crumpled hood in pale streamers. Then the screen went black. I sat there in my parked truck, staring at the laptop screen, feeling my heart slam against my ribs hard enough to hurt. My mouth had gone completely dry. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the laptop steady. The camera had just shown me my own death. In perfect detail. From multiple impossible angles. I checked the timestamp 3 more times, hoping I'd misread it. But the numbers stayed the same. Thursday, 1 week from tonight. 11:47 p.m. I had a delivery scheduled through that exact area, industrial equipment heading to a fabrication plant outside Billings. The route dispatcher had given me would take me through the Montana Badlands on Thursday night, along that precise stretch of highway. I could change the route. I told myself that for 6 straight days. I spent those days trying every angle I could think of. I called dispatch, claimed I was having mechanical trouble. They rerouted me through Wyoming instead. But then the Wyoming route got shut down due to a wildfire, and dispatch put me back on the Montana highway. I had the brakes professionally inspected. They were fine. I replaced all 4 tires even though they had another 10,000 miles on them. I caught up on sleep, ate decent meals instead of gas station junk, made sure I was rested and alert and thinking clearly. But none of it mattered. A detour here, a last-minute schedule change there, a series of small decisions and circumstances I couldn't predict or control. All of it hurting me back toward that moment, correcting my course every single time I tried to deviate. It was like the universe itself was conspiring to put me on that highway at that exact time, ensuring the footage would come true. By Wednesday night, I'd given up trying to fight it. I accepted the inevitable. I reached the Montana Badlands just before midnight, the road empty and dark under a sliver of moon that barely lit the asphalt. I checked the dashboard clock as I drove. 11:42 p.m. 5 minutes. I thought about stopping. Pulling over right now, getting out, walking away into the desert and letting whatever was going to happen without me inside the truck. But my hand stayed locked on the wheel. My foot stayed steady on the accelerator. The camera kept blinking its red eye above me, patient and inevitable. 11:44 p.m. 3 minutes. My heart was hammering. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold air blowing from the vents. The highway stretched ahead into darkness, empty except for the white lines marking the center. No other vehicles. No lights. Just me and the road and the approaching moment. 11:45 p.m. I glanced at the rearview mirror, exactly as I had in the footage. My eyes were wide, pupils dilated with adrenaline. I looked terrified. I looked like a man staring at his own grave. My hand reached for the radio without conscious thought, muscle memory following the script. I twisted the dial. Static erupted from the speakers, a hissing, crackling roar that made my teeth ache and my skull hurt. It filled the cab completely, drowning out even the rumble of the diesel engine. The sound was wrong, somehow. Not like normal radio static. More organic. More alive. Like something breathing, or screaming, or trying to communicate in a language made of white noise and interference. And in that moment, surrounded by that shrieking emptiness, with my hands locked on the wheel and my foot pressed to the accelerator and the dashboard clock glowing 11:45 p.m., I understood. I understood everything. The camera hadn't shown me the crash from multiple angles by accident. Every impossible perspective, every angle that defied the laws of space and time and physics, was a thread. A connection. A command. The device wasn't just predicting my future or documenting my present. It was writing it. Constructing reality frame by frame, angle by angle, weaving me into a narrative I couldn't escape because I was already living inside it. Every clip I'd watched had been a blueprint. Instructions. A script for a play I didn't know I was performing. And I'd followed them all. Every swerve to avoid the pothole. Every brake before the drunk driver appeared. Every movement captured in future footage that I then lived out precisely, thinking I was avoiding danger when really I was just confirming the camera's predictions, making them real, completing the loop. The camera wasn't showing me what would happen. It was showing me what I would do. What I had to do. Because I'd already seen it, and seeing it made it inevitable. I was trapped in a causal loop of my own observation. 11:47 p.m. I yanked the wheel hard to the right. The truck lurched violently, tires shrieking against asphalt, the whole rig shuddering as it fought against momentum and inertia. I slammed both feet on the brake pedal, felt the anti-lock system stutter and pulse beneath my heel. The cab fishtailed, the trailer trying to swing around and jackknife. The dashboard clock glowed green in the chaos. 11:47 p.m. The exact moment. The exact time I was supposed to lose control and die. But I didn't. The truck bucked and shuddered and finally came to a stop on the shoulder, half on gravel, half on dirt. I threw the gear shift into park with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Sat there in a sudden silence, chest heaving, heart slamming, alive. The camera blinked above me. Red LED pulsing in the darkness. And for the first time since I'd bought the device, I felt like it was actually looking at me. Not recording. Not predicting. Just staring. Considering. Recalculating. I got out of the truck. My legs nearly gave out when my boots hit the ground. The night air was brutally cold, sharp enough to cut through my jacket and jeans like they weren't there. My breath came out in ragged clouds. I walked around to the passenger side on legs that felt made of water, opened the door, and reached for the camera. My hand hovered over the suction cup mount. All I had to do was pull. Rip the device free, throw it into the darkness beyond the shoulder, and drive away. Start over. Forget any of this had happened. But standing there in the freezing dark, listening to the wind whistle across the empty Badlands, I realized something that made my blood turn cold. It was too late. The camera had already recorded this moment. Me, standing outside the truck in the middle of the night, hand reaching for the mount but not quite touching it. Me, hesitating. Me, realizing the futility. Me, walking away without destroying the thing that had tried to kill me. It had seen all of this coming. Predicted my escape, my survival, my moment of defiance. Which meant it had already moved past this. Already recorded what came next. Already woven me into whatever narrative followed. I was still in its story. I'd never stopped being in its story. I climbed back into the cab, hands numb, and started the engine. Not toward Billings. Not toward the fabrication plant or the delivery or any obligation I'd had before tonight. I turned the truck around and drove in the opposite direction, putting miles between myself and that stretch of highway as fast as the Peterbilt would carry me. I drove until I reached a truck stop outside Bozeman, just as the sun was starting to paint the eastern sky pale orange. I parked in the back lot, grabbed my duffel bag with my clothes and wallet and nothing else, and walked away from the truck without looking back. The camera stayed on the windshield, suction cup still firmly attached, red LEDs still blinking into the empty cab. Let it record whatever it wanted to record. Let it document the empty driver's seat and the dashboard and the abandoned controls. I was done being its subject. I spent 3 weeks in a cheap motel outside Bozeman, paying cash daily, keeping my head down and the curtains drawn. I ignored the increasingly angry calls from dispatch, ignored the mounting penalties and breach of contract fees for the abandoned delivery. None of it mattered anymore. I had bigger problems than money or reputation. Every night I closed my eyes and saw that footage. Saw myself slumped over the wheel, the truck rolling, the metal crumpling like paper. Saw all those impossible angles, all those perspectives that documented my death from places a camera couldn't reach. The images were burned into my brain, permanent as scars. Eventually, I got a call from a salvage yard in Butte. They'd found my truck at a state auction, bought it cheap, and were prepping it for resale. Did I want to pick up any personal belongings I've left in the cab? Tools, clothes, anything valuable? I told them no. Told them to junk the whole rig, camera and all, crush it into a cube and be done with it. But they didn't. A week later, scrolling through a trucker forum on a library computer, I saw a post that made my stomach drop. Someone had bought a used Peterbilt at auction, great condition, barely any miles, amazing deal. And it came with a dash cam already installed, the new owner wrote. Camera works perfectly. Already started using it to document my routes. Best $20 the previous owner ever spent. I stared at the screen for a long time. I wanted to reply, to send a private message, to warn them about what that camera really was and what it would do to them. But what would I say? That the dash cam records the future? That it films you from angles that don't exist? That it would show them their own death and then make sure it happened? They'd think I was insane. Report me. Block me. And maybe they'd be right. Maybe I was insane. Maybe I'd been on the road too long and something in my head had finally snapped. But I didn't think so. I never went back to trucking. Found a job at a distribution warehouse on the outskirts of Missoula, loading freight onto pallets, driving a forklift, doing the kind of mindless physical work where you don't have to think or make decisions or be responsible for anything more complicated than moving boxes from point A to point B. I kept my head down. Avoided cameras. Avoided mirrors when I could. Took side streets instead of highways, walked instead of driving, tried to stay out of any space where I might be recorded. Because every now and then, I'd catch my reflection in a storefront window or a piece of glass, and the angle would be wrong. Just slightly off. Just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Like I was being viewed from somewhere to my left, or my right, or from above, instead of straight on the way reflections are supposed to work. Like there was a lens somewhere I couldn't see, still documenting, still recording, still building its narrative frame by frame. And I'd wonder if the camera was still out there. If somewhere in some other trucker's cab, in some other truck rolling down some other highway, there was footage of me right now. Me standing here on this street corner in Missoula. Me staring at my own wrong-angled reflection. Me realizing that I'd never really escaped at all. That I was still in the story. Still being recorded. Still following a script I couldn't see. And maybe, somewhere in those files, there was footage of what came next. Of how my story ended. Of the moment when I finally stopped running and the camera caught up with me. Maybe it had already recorded my last day. Maybe it was just waiting for me to live it. To hear more stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one, right here on 11 after midnight.